Yeah.
Welcome to the Slow Wine Guide 2021. I'm here with Randall Watkins, winemaker at Laurel Glen Vineyard, Sonoma Mountain. Welcome, Randall.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thrilled
Glad
to
to
see
be here
you.
with you.
Yeah, thrilled to see you today and looking forward to learning a little bit more about the two vintages for the wines that we're tasting and what's happening in the vineyard at this moment.
Right now, we are in the middle of May, and typically it's about the time when the vines start to flower. Um, we're a little bit behind the more recent vintages, and so right now, um, the cluster potential is there, but we haven't had flowering where the pollen will fertilize the seed and then fruit set. That's going to happen in about a week or two, though, coming right up.
I love that cluster potential. New phrase for me. All right, I love that. So far so good. I know we've had some rain, but we're anticipating kind of a little warming spell, so that should help encourage things to flower, right?
Yes, we have had some light rains, which have helped us to catch up a little bit because we're in a mild drought right now in Northern California. Um, we've had more rain than we've had during the big drought years, so I'm feeling good about the quality of the growing season.
Right. So your vineyard is dry farm, correct?
Yes, we potentially are completely dry farmed. We do have irrigation in place if we really need it, but even during the driest years, we have really only used it in block 6. So it's a little
Which
bit
is at the
drier and
very top
rocky.
of the hill, right? The one at the
That's right.
very top of the
Mm-hmm. A little more sloped and drier soil right there.
Yeah, dry up on top. The vineyard is so beautiful. I can close my eyes and picture it. I can standing in the middle of that vineyard on top of Sonoma Mountain. And have you done any replanting in the last year or a couple years? Are you replanting anything?
We replanted some vines from the 60s about 5 years ago. And so those have been providing a little bit of fruit the last 2 years. Each year a little bit more until you get to be, 6 or 7 years. And that's about the same crop that you'll get for many years now. That was only 2 acres. So we have about 16 acres at the vineyard, and almost entirely Cabernet Sauvignon, except one row of vines from the 1880s that were planted to mixed blacks by the German settlers to Sonoma Mountain. Beautiful up there, as you mentioned. It's about 1,000-foot elevation, the top of Sonoma Mountain, and an east-facing slope that is just fantastic for slow, even ripening of Cabernet Sauvignon.
Absolutely. When you're up there in the morning, it's spectacular, the morning light on that vineyard. So does the fruit from those mixed blacks go into your cab? I'm just curious.
It did prior to 2012. And in 2012, we launched a new wine, which is a rosé. We call it Old Vines Rosé is what it is, but Rosella is the name of our rosé. And it has developed quite a following, this Old Vines Rosé that has just packed with flavor, but very fresh and delicate at the same time.
Fantastic. So that's one of the real special finds in the Slow Wine Guide is the Rosella Rosé made from these absolutely ancient vines on Sonoma Mountain. Really spectacular. We can't not talk about the clone, the Laurel Glen Cabernet clone. We're getting ready to taste the Counterpoint and the Laurel Glen estate. So tell us a little bit, give us a little backstory on the clone.
Cabernet Sauvignon was first planted at Laurel Glen in 1968. And so we're actually bottling the 18 wines right now, which is the 50th year of Cabernet Sauvignon, a very exciting anniversary. I'm about to bottle in 1 month from now. But in the 80s, Patrick Campbell, the wine pioneer of California, was first bottling the Laurel Glen wines. And 1981 was first year for Laurel Glen. Prior to that, the wine had been single vineyard designated in the 70s by Richard Arrowwood, none other than another famed winemaker of California, to actual guys that I've really looked up to over many years of my winemaking career, over 25 years. And so as Patrick developed a big following for his Cabernet Sauvignon at Laurel Glen, he decided, well, actually, Davis decided to take budwood from historic vineyards of California and planted it to determine what's different about these heritage clones of Cabernet. And so Laurel Glen was one of them chosen, and they looked and they didn't recognize it as anything from their records at PMS, and they gave it its own name and number. So it is FPMS it's just 24, clone 24, Laurel Glen clone. And it was distinct in that it ripened a little bit earlier and retained its natural acidity better than most of the other clones. Very small berries too.
And the berries are really small. That I remember that very distinct point. Well, a lot of clones have small berries, but this early ripening is unusual. You don't need a lot of hang time for this particular clone, right?
Well, we do get the hang time because it's cooler at our site than most California Cabernet. We are one mountain range to the west of most of the Cabernet in Sonoma and Napa, where Sonoma Mountain is closer to the Pacific Ocean. Yep. And certainly is significantly cooler than Napa Valley, somewhere between Bordeaux and Northern California in terms of its temperatures, warmer than Bordeaux, cooler than Napa, and we're able to have long hang time and really complex development of flavor over that period where the sugars aren't going up faster than the flavor. I'm able to pick the grapes at a lower Brix and a higher acidity to make the style of wine that Laurel Glen has historically been known for: ageable, elegant, and balanced.
Yes, absolutely. Well, now I am dying to get some wine in the glass here. So we're gonna start with the counterpoint.
Great. 2017 counterpoint.
Yep.
So for many years, actually since 1985, Laurel Glen has had two distinct Cabernet Sauvignon blends, and Counterpoint was started in order to have a little bit lighter, a little bit smoother and earlier drinking Cabernet, as opposed to Laurel Glen Vineyard Estate, which is more of the reserve style, age-worthy, bigger mouth-feeling tannin and structure. So this is certainly still a mountain wine, but we like to release it earlier than Laurel Glen, and in the blending, I'm able to choose which lots will go into Counterpoint versus which will go into Laurel Glen. So 17 really started as an amazing growing season. It was one of the greatest if you were picking your grapes early, which we usually pick the end of September or beginning of October at Laurel Glen. And then the fires came in October 9th to wine country in Northern California. We had picked most of our grapes, but I did have a little bit still out there. Much of the fires were further inland from our estate vineyard, although there were some small fires on Sonoma Mountain as well.
The fruit is, it's very dark fruited. And is that due to a slightly smaller crop, smaller yield? Is it just the character, the nature of the beast?
Yeah, you know, I was looking at my blending notes as well, right before we were talking, and I got a lot of nice Bing cherry and plum in this wine. Excellent mouth. I got good tannin, not as much acidity as Counterpoint sometimes has, but very fresh and lively still.
Oh, absolutely. Very bright, very focused and driven, but the fruit for me is dark and savory. It's amazing. It's much darker than I recall the last couple of vintages that we've tasted together. So, and it's kind of
the savoriness that this vineyard can produce. Classic Cabernet character of both having fruit and savory together in perfect harmony. It can have dried herbs. It can have fresh herbs. I always get a little bit of sage and thyme in our wines, sometimes some lavender, even the menthol characters that bay laurel, the oils of the bay laurel tree can provide. Um,
I'm going with bay laurel. I love it. Spectacular. It's amazing. It's sometimes we talk a little bit too. I don't know how much scrub is up there, like how much, if there's any mesquite or madrone or anything like that up there on the mountain around the vineyard.
there is a little madrone. There's coyote brush. Um,
But that's resinous, right? Coyote brush is kind of a resinous.
yes,
Yeah.
the fires love the coyote brush, to tell you the truth, but didn't want to go back to that part. Beautiful trees up on the mountain. We have oak and some bay as well, but mainly oak in our area.
Mm. Wow. It's such when you talk about it being accessible, it absolutely is. But this is not a shy wine by any stretch of the imagination. This is definitely a wine that has a lot of I always say weight, and someone else said density the other day. It's like there's a density to this wine that's a level of extract, right? The dry extract in the wine that's just giving it that weight in the mouth. It's not coming from alcohol, or the alcohol here is really very moderate, right?
Yes.
14.
Yeah, right. We usually have low 14s would be most Laurel Glen wines. Vintage to vintage, it will vary, of course. And we've had in the high 13s, we've had in the mid 14s as well. But usually low 14s would be a typical Laurel Glen wine.
So there's a lot of vintage expression in these wines, which is not only this very distinctive vineyard, this distinct clone, but you letting the vintage show, showing us what the vintage has to offer and not hiding it or masking it in any way, which is really, really what keeps me looking forward to tasting each new vintage of Laurel Glen.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, my dog is carrying on in the background.
Your dog likes my voice.
Yeah, he's I don't know, he's not as unhappy about something, I don't know. So okay, great. So Counterpoint, that's the 2017 vintage. Now you're holding back the Laurel Glen. You hold it back, you cellar it, you give it some time in bottle, right? Some bottle conditioning before you release it onto the market.
Yes, Laurel Glen Vineyard Estate is almost 2 years in barrel, and then 2 years in bottle before we even start to sell any of it. We think that holding back a little bit longer, usually a year later than most of other people in the industry.
Contemporaries, yeah.
And I think we're releasing it when we think it's at the beginning of its best drinking, and it continues to get better in the bottle, where 5 years is often when I really love Laurel Glen wines, but they'll easily age past 10 years and continue to get very interesting in the bottle.
Yeah, well, I can tell you right now, both of these wines are showing incredibly well today. The minute I can get the cassis from 6 inches out of my glass today, right? I mean, I can't, before I even get my nose anywhere near the glass. It's just radiating varietal typicity, not in a generic way, in a very specific way.
So this is 2016, as you mentioned, 1 year older than the Counterpoint. And with this vintage, we had a lot of great vintages back to back, to tell you the truth. This was another great vintage for California Cabernet. It was the end of the drought years, which was 2012 to 2015.
Yeah.
So it actually finally got enough rain to fill the soil profile, and still yet had another early harvest because bud break was early. And from there, each stage of the vineyard, the stage where we are right now that we're speaking, is bloom time, and then there's veraison and harvest, are kind of some of the main points in the growing season. each of those was about 3 weeks earlier than normal in 2016. So we were picking at the end, middle to end of September, and long hang time still because everything started early. Even though we didn't pick late, we still had the same amount of ripening time in the vineyard.
To reach physiological ripeness and get that phenolic ripeness that you're looking for. One thing that strikes me about this particular vintage expression is that the finish, the tannins are so fine, and they're very, very fine, and there's no astringency or bitterness, but the finish is quite firm. It's really quite there. It tells me that over time, those tannins are going to continue to evolve over time.
That's a great point that you make. And so some of the tannins, of course, are coming from the thick grape skins that we have from being on the mountain with shallower soils and rocky soils. That's not my dog. That's my daughter. The vines are struggling a bit in the way that can concentrate flavors and have thick skins, dark color, and even better quality tannins. If the berries have too much water, then they'll have lower tannin and color. So having that hillside grown fruit is allowing that. The other thing is that the oak tannins are in there as well. So we're using
the elagia tannin. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the wood tannin. So now that we're on the topic of wood, about how much new oak did these wines see, the Counterpoint and the estate?
So Counterpoint, the first wine you had was 30% new French oak, 10% new American oak, and then 60% older barrels. And so it was all oak aged. And then Laurel Glen, 50% new French oak and 50% older French oak. The main barrel that we like, and it's the barrel that I've used for many years in my career. Taranceau is a French cooper that Patrick Campbell used exclusively for Laurel Glen Estate. And I was very excited to see that because it was after many years of experimenting with many barrels, I like to have trials where I taste between coopers, and this was the one that was always number one or number two in my tasting trials over the years. And so if the owner wants to buy some of the best, then that's great for me. And we continued with that tradition with using almost entirely Taranceau barrels.
Well, it's a very elegant choice because certainly the secondary characteristics from the oak are completely integrated into the wine. There's no way you can separate them out. I mean, they're fully integrated, and I think the wood tannins polymerize as well too, right? They polymerize just the way grape tannin does, right? So they're all the tannin chains kind of hook up.
It is a little different with the elagia tannins, but the tannins will continue to smooth over and appear more rounded over time. That's correct.
Yeah, great, cool, it's great. Well, really, it must be nice to be so confident you've got this mountain fruit. You can put it into 50% new oak and not worry that it soaks it right up and gulps it right down. It's great.
And there is the antioxidant properties of the tannins, which can help the wine to stay fresher, and the phenolics from the grapes and from the barrel both can protect the wine against oxidizing over time, so it will age better.
Yeah, it's a great way of adding some extra durability to the wine over time. So exciting. Well, thank you so much for sharing these two wines with me today. It's such a treat to taste them. I think this is my third vintage tasting, my third successive vintage tasting from the estate. So I'm starting to develop a taste memory and a bit of a track record. Now, when I visit the wines, I can start to connect the dots a little bit, which is really exciting.
I really value your opinion on wines, so it's exciting for me to try for you to be drinking wines that I've created. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. I really, really appreciate it. And my best to everyone there at Laurel Glen Vineyards, and happy harvest.
Well, I look forward to seeing you in the vineyard again soon.
Sometime soon, for sure, Randall. Thanks very much.
Okay, Deborah. See you later.
Bye.